Greetings, introductory Photoshop students. Today we're going to talk about layers and introduce you to the basics about the layers palette. We're going to discuss the various palette options that are available. I'm going to show you how to add or delete layers. Then we're going to talk about showing, hiding, and locking different layers. We'll link layers and move them around. And then we'll also talk about naming and organizing your layers. So let's take a look at an example of a fairly complex graphic design for a home page. If we look at the layers, you can see this long list of items, and right now it's a fairly disorganized list. Your layers appear in this list in order from lowest to highest. Think of it as a layer cake. So the lowest layer is this background layer that you can see is black. And some of the other layers appear above it. So as I click on the little eyeball next to the layer, it shows or hides that particular layer. The layer that's selected is highlighted in blue. And I can move these layers around and change the general way they appear by just moving them around. Notice how in this case it's if I take the tin, for example, and it's just a little tin texture on the bottom left, and I move it below the lower slate, suddenly we can no longer see the tin layer. So that kind of illustrates the layer cake idea from lowest to highest as you move up the list. You have quite a few different options available to you in this palette. These are blending modes in this drop-down menu, and for now we'll just know that these are blending modes and that's where you can find them. We'll talk in more detail about them later. You can change the opacity of specific layers simply by selecting the layer and then using this slider to decrease the opacity of a layer. As you can see, one of my layers in the background is becoming less apparent as I slide down and more apparent as I slide up. Same thing here. I can choose this slate texture and I can change the opacity of that specific layer. So that's kind of cool. The fill has to do with the percentage or the interior opacity for each layer. For example, if you used the paint bucket tool and you were going to fill a specific layer with color, then you would have the ability to change that opacity as well. This zone here allows you to lock various things. You can lock the layer entirely, and it doesn't allow you to do any adjustments to it. You can move it around within the layer cake, but you cannot do anything to it. Notice now when my cursor rolls over that layer that has just been locked, which is the slate, I can't actually do anything to that. It won't let me choose the paint bucket tool and fill it. It won't let me erase anything. So the entire thing is locked. You can do other things that are super cool as well, like lock the position of a layer, or just lock pixels of the layer, or lock specific transparent pixels within the layer. And this slider on the right allows you to move up and down and view all of the layers in the layer cake. These are layer options below that appear as follows. If I need to delete a layer, I just click on the little trash can on the lower right. If I want to create a new layer, I click here on this new layer button. When I click once, it creates a new unnamed layer. Click on the trash can, removes. And it asks me, are you sure you want to delete layer 20? Yes, I do. This folder allows you to create folders and helps you create a new group and helps you to keep your layers organized. This button here helps you to create new fill or adjustment layers. This button allows you to create layer masks, which we'll get into as well in a later module instruction. This Effects button, if you click on it, will bring you to the details of a layer's style. So you can apply special effects to layers, and then this button allows you to see the details of those effects. And this final button on the left allows you to select two layers and link them. When these layers are linked, that means that if one is moved, then the other moves. So, for example, if I wanted to link, let's say, the lower photo, the slate, and the tin, I select all three by holding my Shift key down. I can link them. And now if I do something to one of those layers, like let's say I want to move one, it moves all three. If I unlink those by holding my Shift key down and toggling the Link Layers button once more, they unlink. Notice the link icon disappeared, and now I can move the layer individually without the others. Okay, so that's what the links do. The drop-down menu for the Layers panel is located here on the top right. There's a little tiny arrow, kind of hard to see, with what indicates is a drop-down menu to appear. So that's the icon for drop-down menu. If I click, I can see that there are quite a few options for the Layers panel. And we'll talk about each of these in the next demonstration. But for now, I just want you to notice where all of these things are and just kind of know where they're located. So I've shown you already that to show and hide specific layers, you can just turn the eyeball off, turn the eyeball back on, and that shows and hides different layers. I've also showed you that you can move the layers around and move layers above certain other layers, obscuring the layers below, especially if they're 100% opacity. So you can move layers around in this way. Another thing you can do is name your layer. You can name it when you first create it. So if I create a new layer, I can just double click on the name, and I can rename the layer by typing its new name. Now I don't want to keep this one, so I'm going to delete it by clicking on the trash can. This layer has not yet been named. This layer corresponds to this photo here. So I'm going to name this layer Example Photo. And naming your layers helps you to keep these organized. The other thing you can do to help organize your layers is you can group them. So let's take a look at something on the stage here. Each one of these are meant to be buttons to different parts of the website. It might be interesting to group these so that I don't have this huge list of the layer cake. So what I could do is I could create a new folder. When I click on this icon here, the folder icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, it creates a folder. I can double click and rename this folder, so I'm going to call it Buttons. And then I'm going to select everything that is related to the buttons. Now I just happen to know what those are, so I'm going to click and select by holding the Shift key down. I can select a series of layers at once. Let's do that again. Click, hold the Shift key down, scroll until I find the last in the series that I would like to select, and now I can drag the selected layers into that folder. Now you can still see them, but if I want to free up space in my entire layers palette, I can just toggle the little arrow next to the folder, and now that it has made this a much more organized layer. system. So you're creating layer systems for yourself, and you want to create it, in such a way that it makes sense to you. Maybe you want to group things together. So for example, we already noticed that on the lower left, the tin texture, the little slate lower texture, and this bottom photo kind of work together. So I might create a new group folder and call this one low left. And everything that's in the lower left of my picture plane here are now grouped as I shift select them, drag them underneath the folder, and now I can toggle the little arrow next to the folder to hide them within the folder. So that's really important to keep layers organized as your multi-layered compositions get more and more complicated. As you can see, it can get out of hand rather quickly, and the most important thing is to remind you to always name your layers as soon as you create them, because it will help you immensely keeping all of these items straight. And this concludes your introductory lesson on layers and the layers palette.